Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So today we are going to focus on the double entry rules. What is the double entry rules? Double entry rules is actually to determine how to record the items in the accounts. In accounting, every business transaction will have at least two effects on the accounting equation. The following are the effects of the business transaction. Number one, the transaction affects the asset and liability. Number two, the transaction affects the asset and owner equity. Number three, the transaction is between asset and expenses. Number four, the asset and revenue. And lastly, we have the transaction is between asset and asset. Okay, in recording the business transactions, we need to apply double entry rules. So under double entry rule, it states that every debit has a correspondence of credit entry. It means that, okay, when we want to record the transaction, we need to bear in mind that, okay, there is need to have one account to be debited and another account to be credited. Okay, let's say this is a machine account. Each account must have its own name. For example, machine account, cash accounts, and etc. So, in the account itself should have a debit side and credit side. So, there is no need to state as right side or left side. It represents by the debit side and also a credit side. Okay, look at the asset accounts. Okay, example of asset account, we have vehicles account, cash account, furniture, we have plant machinery and etc. Okay, please bear in mind that each accounts, okay, for each account we need to state the names of the accounts, okay, at the top of the accounts. Okay, let's say it is an asset account. For example, we have cash, vehicle and etc. So for the asset account, okay, when we apply double entry rules, if the transaction caused the asset to be increased, it needs to be recorded in the debit side. Meanwhile, the decrease in asset will be recorded in the credit sides of the accounts. Okay, in the double entry rules for the expenses account, okay, we know that, okay, the example of the expenses account, we have insurance expenses, we have utility, we have repair, we have purchases, we have depreciation, and etc. So, for the expenses account, the double entry rules, okay, used is that the increase in the expense account will be put in or recorded in the debit side. Meanwhile, the transaction that caused the expenses to decrease will be recorded at the credit side. Okay, next one we are going to cover the liability accounts. So for the liability, okay, an increase in the liability need to be recorded at the credit side. Meanwhile, the decrease in the liability need to be recorded at the debit side. So example of the liability accounts, we have bank loan, we have account payable, we have short-term bank loan, we have mortgage, and etc. Okay, for the revenue accounts, okay, so revenue, example of revenue, we have sales account, we have dividend income, we have rental income. So for the revenue accounts, an increase in the revenue need to be recorded at the credit side. Meanwhile, the decrease in the revenue need to be recorded at the debit side. Okay, for the owner equity, the transaction that involve the owner equity, meaning that this transaction refers to the capital account and drawing accounts. So, for these two items, the increase in the owner equity will be recorded in the credit side. Meanwhile, the decrease in the owner equity will be recorded at the debit side. Okay, the following is the summary of the double entry rules. Okay, item 1, assets. So increase in asset need to be recorded at the debit side. Meanwhile, decrease in asset need to be recorded at the credit side. Expense. Increase in expense need to be recorded at the debit side. Meanwhile, decrease in expense need to be recorded at the credit side. Next, we have owner equity. Increase in owner equity need to be recorded at the credit side. Meanwhile, decrease in the owner equity need to be recorded at the debit side. Liability. Increase in the liability need to be recorded at the credit side. Meanwhile, decrease in the liability need to be recorded at the debit side. Revenue. Increase in the revenue need to be recorded at the credit side. Meanwhile, increase in the revenue need to be recorded at the debit side. Please take note that the capital accounts will always have a credit side and drawing will always be at the debit side. Okay, now look at the example 1. Okay, first transaction. Started business with RM 5,000 cash. So the effect of the transaction is increase in assets and increase in owner equity. So increase in asset need to be recorded at the debit side. So debit cash accounts, and increase in the owner equity need to be recorded at the credit side. So therefore, we need to credit the capital accounts. Okay, look at transaction number 2. Paid RM 200 cash for utility expenses. When you pay utility, it means that there is a decrease in your assets. So the effect is that expense increase and asset decrease. So increase in expense need to be recorded at the debit side. So we need to debit the utility expense accounts, and we need to credit the cash accounts because the asset is decreased. Next, transaction number 3. Receive RM 300 cash for dividend income. The effect is that asset increase, revenue increase. So asset increase need to be recorded at the debit side. So debit cash accounts, and increase in the revenue need to be recorded at the credit side. Therefore, we credit the dividend income.